place was a strange time capsule from about 10 years behind in technology and 100 in society, home to one of the last educational facilities to stop enforcing segregation, an oddly advanced caricature of the old Wild West. I was convinced there were few places in the U.S. left where a firm handshake and the right look in your eye were about all the business sense you needed to work your way in, such as this was. It seems everyone and everything that could be found there, which wasn't much, was within an arm's reach. This feeling of being center-ringed and yet in the middle of nowhere caused many of the younger generations to lose patience and take the first train out as opportunity arose. There's always the risk in such a small community to burn one's name in effigy by poor decisions. Humility was inescapable where you couldn't avoid being known. The failings of this nature were most often self-inflicted, in that I had seen many fall far from grace in the public eye, only to be transplanted 27 miles away to wreak the same havoc that they had caused in the first place. The city manager very nearly voted out of position by city council. Troubling times indeed. As much as I wished to detach myself from political discourse, in the small confined places where chickens were kept in close quarters, it seemed impossible to escape. Another hiker found it in the headlines. He had left a note to contact the park if he had not returned by 2. The park rangers had found it too late. He was found about a quarter mile off the poorly marked trail. Presumably he had gotten lost, headed out, or returning. Either was a frightening concept. He was from near Houston, near home. A place I no longer thought of as home, but familial ties have a way of grounding you to a location you may not inhabit regularly. A place you know you'll always have to return to eventually, because you cannot leave those who will not leave themselves. To me, the place had been a crutch. Too many support mechanisms for personal growth. In my particular case, I needed the challenges. I needed the struggles. The only way I knew how to swim was in the deep end. My present situation wasn't the first time I had been out to prove that to myself. Around a decade and a half ago, I had staked out to the far northeastern coast with a few $100s and as much warm weather clothing as I could fit into the few bags I'd be able to take on the bus with me. My previous partner in crime, Calvin, had moved there a few months prior to be near his girlfriend at the time. She had just accepted a scholarship to a prestigious Ivy League school as a top classman. He had called me as often as possible to make arrangements for me to move there also. He had moved into a multi-family house with room for rent. The owner was a talented guitarist with a serious collection. Cal convinced me he could get me a job as soon as I arrived at a large retail chain. I was working at a small grocery store, which wasn't much to brag about, so all this talk of moving to the north, where presumably all the action was, starting a band and taking over the world, sounded tempting. It was late in the evening, around 10 o'clock perhaps, when my bus was scheduled to leave. I said goodbye to my mother and my sister and climbed aboard. I had brought several CDs with me, some burned, most purchased from pawn shops. God, I miss pawn shops. The only one that stands out was Rancid's and Out Come the Wolves. I remember feeling the appropriateness of it as I contemplated the bittersweet notion of leaving the familiar in exchange for a world of mystery. I was thankful, at least initially, that most of the seats were empty, so the first 12 or the 48 or so hour ride were spent sleeping. The remaining time was largely spent reading and watching the scenery along the eastern states. Otherwise, it was paying attention to where and when stops would be to provision for food and restroom breaks that were not in what could easily be mistaken for a porta-john at the back of a roller coaster. Few landmarks made their way through the years of memory, some only because of their awful nature. The vined trees in Mississippi, the changing colors of the trees along the interstate in Virginia. In Alabama, we rested at the most vile fuel station. The smell carries with me to this day, and I will never forget the sudden churn in my stomach. It smelled as though someone had deep-fried something they had found at the bottom of their shoe, to excess. The horrors. North Carolina was where I distinctly felt the change in climate. It was much more chill to the air than I was used to. I'd come to find out later that in the north, this was the northernmost portion of the south. Evening approached on day 2. I wondered if I would smell New Jersey. I was disappointed that I did not. It actually seemed nice from what I could view in my coach seat. At this point, I was rather interested in the sights, such as the George Washington Bridge. I didn't know if I'd be able to see any of New York's famous landmarks from the route I was on, so I paid close attention. What I did see was that it was a place I would not want to own a vehicle. Lined along the streets for miles, parking must have kept people from sleeping at night. Perhaps that's why it's a city that never sleeps. One could develop a crippling phobia of all forms of transportation. Between traffic and delayed pickup at the station, I arrived quite a bit later than expected. Any dwelling on this was quickly put away by the discovery of all-night corner store sub shops. Did you say I could get a foot-long cheeseburger on a sub at 1 a.m.? And you're getting a what? Foot-long cheesesteak smothered in chili? They called it a Nightmare on Elm Street. Also awaiting me at my new residence were a few 40-ounce bottles of 211. Steel reserves. God-awful malt liquor with a ridiculous alcohol content. Thus Cal and I celebrated my arrival, and with gusto. I woke early the next morning on the couch in my shorts, too close to vomiting and too slow and far from the restroom to make it. 5 o'clock on my first morning there, and I'm cleaning my sick spray off the floor. I remember noticing as I wiped my mess from the wood panels, swirls of matted dog hair came up with it. I was making clean spots. I never walked barefoot in that house again. I remained there for close to 2 years, and many of the plans came to fruition. Cal had gotten me a job, a place to live. We joined a band, and many strange adventures took place. Eventually I felt the need to leave. My relationship with Cal had disintegrated and I felt scrutinized. Seems he always had advice for me that had caused me to resent him. It's no love lost, but that isn't the road we're on. I didn't fit in there anyway. I didn't understand them, and they didn't understand me. I missed Texas, and I knew it was time to go home.